All right, we're gonna do a video today, quick video on how to set a backsplash. Even though this is in my pantry, but it's the same thing no matter what you wanna do if you wanna set it in your kitchen. So a couple things that you're gonna need. Obviously a tape measure, something to mark, some spacers. These are just horseshoe spacers. Maybe even a couple of these little plastic wedges, and I'll list all of these in my, I'll have all this product linked. And you're gonna need a V-notch trowel. So this is a little trowel, and like I said, it's just like got these little 1/8" V-notches in here, and this is gonna be perfect for applying our mastic. And then this is our mastic, and it doesn't matter what brand. So this is from Mapei, this is from Customs, doesn't really matter. I have this bucket left over, but this is just a nice little adhesive. You can use this on areas that are on your walls and for dry spaces. I see some people setting showers with this. Don't ever do it. It's not made for that. It's not made for wet space. But anyway, it's just got this little pasty consistency, and that's really all you'll need, and then just your tile. So I always start off by pulling my plugs out, just like you see here. And one of the things that I always like to do is I always like to come and wrap them in black electrical tape. So this way you don't get shocked. You usually don't get shocked when you're setting the tile, but when you're grouting it, you'll absolutely get shocked because your hands are wet and you're sponging and everything like that, and you hit the side of that little outlet, it'll give you quite the tingle. So that's what you need to start, and then we'll show you a couple. Just like some people like to apply the mastic to the wall. If the space is big and wide open, it makes sense. Sometimes they like to apply it to the back of the tile, and honestly, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just what you want to do. So I've started here by giving myself a center line, and this is going to be a brick pattern on this particular tile. So we're just going to go with the staggered grout joint and do a little offset. Just grab your V-notch trowel, stick it in your bucket here, grab some mastic, get a little piece on there, spread it to your wall. This stuff's a little bit older. It's got some chunks in it, but it'll be fine. We'll mix it together as we spread it out. I might even move to the other bucket here. Yeah, I'm going to. Hang on. Just gonna run with this. Another good reason for putting the tape on the side of these outlets is if you ever hit it with your trowel, it'll make a nice spark. You don't want to spread too big of an area, just spread an area that's big enough for you to set, because if the mastic starts to skim over, then you gotta scrape it off your wall and start all over. And this isn't like setting other tile, like if when you're on a floor and you're back buttering the tile, you don't have to do that when it's on a backsplash and you're using mastic. You just stick it up off your center line and start going to town. All right, so I've been setting this splash, and right here when I set this portion right here, I applied the mastic right to the wall, and then I just stuck the tiles up. So if you're one that doesn't want to do it that way, you can just grab your tile, grab your V-notch trowel, get a little bit of mastic on it, and then just spread it like this. A little bit slower, right? Because you're not going to have the production speed, but you can do it like that. And then you just take it, stick it to your wall, and when you do, you just kind of give it just a little nudge. Same when I did this and I put my mastic to my wall. You just take the tile and you just kind of like shake it back and forth just a little bit to just kind of get it to seat in and settle in. And it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Any kind of pattern would do the same thing. You can, if it's a square tile, wouldn't matter. And if you want to use spacers in between each one, you can. I eyeball it. I've been doing it long enough. I don't stick spacers in between, but if you want to, you can. And you'll definitely want to, with most tiles, just depends on the application, but you'll definitely want to do some type of spacer or a wedge in between them so that they don't sag. So when I come here and I go to set this tile here, in order to get, if I just set it up like this, it'll stay pretty well with mastic, but if I bump it or nudge it, it'll sag down. So it's just as easy, just use a horseshoe shim like this if you want to use those, or just these little plastic wedges. These are setting for tile, and once again, I'll link all these. And you can put that in, and then that way you don't have to worry about your material sagging down the wall or losing your alignment. It makes it really easy. So you just butter it like that. Stick it in your shim until you're done.
And why are you stair stepping like that instead of just going all the way up?
Why am I staggering like that? Well, it just makes it easier for you to have consistent lines. So whenever I'm doing a brick pattern, I'll always stagger it like that when I'm setting it. Because if you get into a situation where you're going like this, right? If you're going up and down, then you're sticking tiles in. But if you stair step it when you set a running bond or a brick pattern like this, then you don't have to worry about sliding a tile inside of it. Not necessarily anything right or wrong about it, it's just my personal preference. You can set like 3 or 4 of them like this, come back. And then you can add your shims afterwards if you want. So you come in here, boom, boom. Now I've got this piece up along the top of the cabinet here, and I've got to make a cut. So I'm going to grab my little Sharpie here. And what I do is I just hold the tile up against the cabinet like this, and then now I know it's basically just a little bit more than a grout joint's width here. And I make my mark. So now when I come back, I've made that cut. The cut will be up against the cabinet because you don't want to have a cut edge here in this grout joint. You want to leave it a nice factory edge. If you're gonna be making a bunch of cuts repeatedly, I just grab either another piece of tile. This is just a piece of wood that I picked up off my garage. Line it up with my blade here. And then now I know these other pieces that are gonna go on the cabinet will have a similar cut. You're gonna make repeated cuts. I'll stick a little block or another piece of tile here. Now I don't have to mark all these other tiles. I can just stick it right back in there, and I can duplicate that cut over and over and over again. Basically, it's a fence. This saw actually came with a fence. I've had this saw for close to 15 years now, so I have no idea where the fence is. It's long gone, but I just use a little block of wood that does the same thing. Sometimes when you have to cut just a small slice off of a piece of a tile, your blade will want to kind of bend as you're cutting out. So I'm cutting this piece up right against my cabinet, and it's super thin. And so there's nothing keeping that blade from just bending over. So you end up cutting into your tile nicely here, but by the time you get to your end, there's nothing else cut. And so one of the tricks you can do to keep that from going is grab another piece of tile, set it right up against it. Now when that blade's cutting through, it's gonna keep that pressure up against both sides of the blade, so you can make that real thin slice off the edge of a tile and not have your blade keep bending and moving off. Let me show you how I do it. So you can see I just took a blade's width off this tile, and this tile, by the way, has a very irregular edge, so it's kind of hard to see how perfect this is, but you can see I took a blade's width off this tile right here compared to the tile next to it. And typically speaking, when you're doing something like that, especially on a piece of porcelain, which this is just a regular ceramic, but on a piece of porcelain tile, if you're cutting it like that, that blade will keep wanting to veer off and not stay straight. So this is a little trick to help get those nice straight cuts. I've done a video on this in the past, but I just want to do it again since I'm talking about tile. So on these Decora style outlets, that's anything that's got the rectangle, right, instead of the 2 circles. So all of your GFIs will be like this, and then if you do Decora plugs, you'll have this as well. On a normal plug that has the 2 ovals or 2 circles, the switch plate cover has a screw right in the center. These do not. So when you're cutting out your tile, if you don't make a little notch for these these 2 screws right here that are on the outside, then these screws will actually sit off your switch plate cover about like that far because they can't go in. And so I'm going to show you a couple things. One, how do we make these cuts in these outlets on the tile saw? So obviously if you have a box on the wall, you're gonna mark it that way, but I'm just gonna do this real quick for demonstration purposes. And then we'll come in here, mark that, mark here, okay. So now we've got this U shape. A lot of people are like, hey, how do you cut that on a tile saw? because the blade, you know, obviously wants to run, you know, straight through. How do you come in here? Because you can't really make this cut on a tile saw. So I'll show you real quick how I do it, and then we'll talk about how we mark for these little notches afterwards. I'll do it in 2 steps. This Sharpie will come right off of this glazed tile as soon as it gets wet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go like this real quick. I'm just gonna now I know where my marks are, and then I'm gonna cut down to that Sharpie line on one side. All right, now to make this, we're gonna do a bunch of small cuts. How you do that. So we've got our 2 cuts made as if it were on the wall there, and you've got your outlet, right? So this would fit perfectly except for the fact of these 2 little screws. So with your outlet either on the wall or in your hand, it doesn't matter, you need to come in and make this little mark, because that is the one that matters. If you want, you can put a little pinhole to tell you where the screw is. It doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna cut right up to that Sharpie mark. So you can see, you would think that you had that done, but you've got to make this little notch here. Do the same thing here. Because otherwise what will happen is you're gonna set your backsplash, you're gonna go to put your plug in, and then you're gonna have to come in here with a Dremel tool, and you're gonna have to create that little U-notch in your cut in order to get that screw in. Or you'll have to come in and just drill it like with a little diamond bit. So kind of a pain in the neck. It's a little bit easier to just do it ahead. So I'll show you how, once again, I'll show you how I do that cut on it. Cuts are all done now. I've got the little U shape in there. Let's just hold the outlet over it. You can see now when this, if these were 2 tiles sitting on the countertop now, if it was time to drive one of these screws through with the switch plate, you could actually go through and see it. So, you know, something to keep in mind here. Obviously, this is just me demonstrating how to make a cut for an outlet. As you can see here, like this is a U shape in this tile. These 2 are just cut straight, nothing here. We just had to notch a little one out of this one. So every outlet you're gonna hit is good. The plugs are gonna hit it in a different place, because a couple things. One, the electrician never puts the outlet in the exact same place, you know, height, so it's always gonna be different. 2, are your countertops level, or your cabinets level, is your tile setting level. I mean, all those are different variables. So you'll run into different heights, but you know, this could be offset or whatever, but still the principle is the same. You just mark where your box is and then make sure you account for these screws. And I kind of make a big deal of it, and I talk about it all the time because I see professional tile guys constantly, this is their job, and they're always leaving these out. So when it's time to put the covers in there, you can't even do it. Someone's trying to buy like super short screws. It's a pain in the neck. It's just so much easier to do that ahead of time. It's time to grout. Tile's all set, wiped down, ready to go. Some things you're gonna need for grout. You're gonna need a grout float, you're gonna need a sponge, margin trowel for cleanup, and some good rubber gloves so that once you start sponging, your hands don't get all nasty. I see lots of people sponge without gloves on, and it's definitely more comfortable to do it that way, but if you grout a lot, there's a lot of lime in that cement in the grout, and it just starts to eat your hands away. Your fingers start to get all raw, and it's pretty crappy. So That's what we need to get to grout. Now let's go mix it. Okay, when I grout, I usually have 3 buckets. 1 bucket for my mixing drill, and you can just use anything. This is what I use to mix my grout. It's just got a gigantic egg beater mixing drill. 1 bucket with a little bit of water in it. Doesn't take much to mix grout, and then another bucket we'll have with just clean water for sponging. So this has got a lot of water in it. This is the biggest mistake I see people make, is they put too much water in, and then they end up using a whole bag of grout, and sometimes you can't even finish the job because your grout's all too wet. So this is just regular old poly blend sanded grout from Customs. It's from Home Depot. Just add your water first. Put your grout in there. Mix it slowly. Might take you a time or two to get your consistency right, but this is like something I could easily trowel, easily work with. So first thing you do is after you mix it and you get that mixture right, is let it sit in your bucket for a few minutes, because it's going to set up or slake. So just let it sit up like that, and then I'm not going to add any more water. We're just going to bring the mixing drill back up there and mix it up, and then it'll be ready to go. So you can see, like, this stuff kind of hardens up. Like, this is way harder than it was when I first finished mixing, so not adding any water at all. You just come back, put your mixing drill in here. One last time, now we're ready to apply. Right now all you do is, you have your grout in your bucket, you have your grout float, grab it, and just start pressing it in everywhere. You just press it into every corner, every side, get it in every direction. Corners are always the most difficult. You want to make sure it's just packed into every joint until it's solid. Otherwise, when it dries, it'll shrink in there and you'll have air bubbles. And that would suck. One other thing is, once you get a bunch of grout in an area like this, I'll show you in just a second. So you got all this extra grout on your tile. So that it doesn't leave a big mess for you to sponge, you'll take the edge of your grout float at about a kind of, I don't know, maybe 45-degree angle, and across your grout joint so that it's not digging in. You'll just kind of squeegee off any excess and apply it. So that way, when it comes time for us to sponge, we're not having to sponge off huge amounts of grout. Grout is in. Now it's time to sponge. Once again, I wear these latex gloves. You choose whether or not you want to. I've done jobs where I didn't do them, and like I said, my hands were raw by the end of it. So now the grout's on. It's been on there for a few minutes. I did 2 walls. I didn't do over here yet. I'm gonna start doing my first round of sponging. So my sponge is wet. The trick is, put it in your bucket and just squeeze it like this. Don't wring it, don't twist it. You'll ruin your sponge quickly. So just squeeze it, and then you just start forming and shaping your grout. Like it's just a light scrub, nothing too intense. Maybe I'll do it over here so it's easier for you to see in the camera. So all I'm doing here is just kind of knocking stuff down and just shaping it in the grout joints here. And after the one side gets kind of dirty, just do the same thing. You're looking for holes, little air bubbles, maybe things that you would have missed when you were using the grout float. This is another reason why I use a margin trowel. So up here in this corner, you can see that there's a lot of buildup of grout. I'm gonna come in with a nice sharp corner. I'll cut that grout out. So we'll be caulking that later. So And then you come back to your clean water here and just squeeze. That's it, don't twist it, otherwise it won't last very long. And you just come back, and just work those joints out so they look like how you want. Then you got the desired depth on there. Make sure you're not taking too much out. Make sure you're not leaving too much on. You just kind of work it up and down across the joints, sometimes with the joints, just to get it just right, and you'll just get a feel for it. Cool thing is, if you ever take too much out, just grab a little chunk like this. Let's say I took too much out right here. Just put that grout, you can just put it right on your hand. You don't even have to put it back on the grout float. Add it to that area and then smooth it out. So you really can't mess this stage up. The mistake I see most people make at this stage is they wait too long to start sponging, and this grout is hardened up, and then they have to really fight to get everything cleaned up, and that can be brutal. And I've done that myself many times. I did that when I actually grouted my kitchen. I got ahead of myself and I was all by myself and it was late, and that sucked, because then you're really working hard to get it clean. So similar to what we just did on the top of the cabinet, on the bottom of the countertop, I'm going to come in with my margin trowel and remove that excess, because we're going to be caulking that joint. This grout will crack no matter what you do. Doesn't matter. Anytime you have a change of planes in your tile work, you should always caulk that. So I just grout it first and then cut it out of my way. Then, once you have the tile looking like you want with the grout, this is where you're gonna have a nice clean grout, and you just come in here with one edge and you just wipe it like this. You'll see there's white, and I flip it, I do it again, I'm gonna flip it again. Now I'm gonna use this clean edge, come along like this, and now I'm gonna come back to do this, and that's it. And then I'm gonna redip my sponge, and you'll keep doing that until everything looks like you want. You might have a light haze. I might come diagonally there, see it gets lighter and lighter each time. Now this area is ready until my grout hardens up a little bit more and I can do my final step. So I'm gonna keep repeating this throughout the rest of the backsplash. Got the first round of sponging all done in here now. The next thing I need to do is I need to dump this bucket of grout water. So a couple things, don't dump it down a sink. Don't dump it down a toilet. That grout in the bottom of this bucket, there's quite a bit of the sand and still of this, it's just the grout sitting at the bottom of here. So just go ahead and dump it in a bush somewhere, the water, and then at the very bottom of the bucket you're gonna have a bunch of grout. Just scoop that out with your marge, and I like to put it in just like a plastic grocery bag. The same with any of the grout left over. So you see I have like a little bit of grout left over in the bucket. Just scoop that and and whatever else is in the bottom of your sponge bucket out, and then we'll do another fresh bucket of water here. Do one final sponge on everything, let it set up for a minute, and then we're gonna come back and caulk. Got my final sponging done, everything's good to go. Now the last thing we need to do is caulk. So why do we caulk? Well, whenever you have two planes intersect like this, there's this grout right here, it will not stay like this. So it looks good today, but it's gonna crack. And so every time it hits a corner, every time it hits a cabinet, every time it hits a corner of the tile, up against this cabinet or up against the corner top or countertop, all those edges have got to be caulked. So I used sanded grout on my backsplash, so I'm going to use sanded caulk. So you can get this in the tile aisle of all the big box stores. Everybody has it, Home Depot, Lowe's. If you picked a color that they don't have, all your tile stores will have it. So Dewalt tile, Arizona tile, American Olean, Florida Core and more, whatever that store is called, they'll have it too. So I used Arctic White grout. So I have Arctic White caulk, and you'll see right here, it is sanded. So at the store, it'll either say non-sanded or sanded. So sanded is gonna be creamy and smooth, similar to the caulk that you're used to having. Sanded is gonna match my grout. So once this grout all dries and I caulk this, you actually, because this is sanded, you won't be able to tell what's caulk and what's grout. It's just that this is gonna be elastomeric. So there's a lot of videos online of like super fancy people caulking and spraying Windex, and they go in there with their little like tongue depressor or popsicle stick, whatever, and they put it down and they peel the tape and all stuff like that. I'm just going to show you. You don't have to have any skills to use this kind of caulk. It's readily available, and I'll show you how we use it. So just grab your knife. I always cut a slight angle, about like that, and then I like to flatten the tip just like that. Just my personal preference. You don't have to do it. Put it in your caulk gun, and I always make it so that that flat tip that I cut is on top. And then we're just going to go and get some caulk coming out. A little bit wet. All right, there we go. You can feel it has some grit. It's got sand in it, so it's kind of cool. All right. Now that I made a mess over here. All right, here we go. Just going to go into the corner. Lay a bead down just like this. Right to my corner. Now I'm just going to get my finger wet in my bucket of water here. And I'm just going to smooth it over. Do the same thing coming the opposite direction. Right here is kind of weird. I had some water sitting on my countertop, so I'll have to hit that spot over again. So,
see. Should I break that down?
Here's what's cool about this kind of caulk. Because this is siliconized acrylic, it cleans up with water. So, just like your caulk or your grout, you can come back here, and now you can kind of like start to dial in this caulk joint. Smooth it out with your finger a little bit, and then use your sponge to get that nice and tight and clean. Let this one spot dry right here before I apply more caulk to it. It's just a wet spot. Didn't wait long enough. Anyway, you can see that's what I do. I just get that line nice and consistent. I don't put any more caulk down. I just get this one area just how I like it. Working it back and forth. And we'll do that with every edge. You can do the same method to caulk your shower. I see people using pure silicone in a shower and it just makes a huge mess. You can use the exact same caulk, sponge and water, put it in the crack, start working it in, let it dry for, if it's in a shower, for a couple days. But on a backsplash, tomorrow we can start loading up this pantry and putting everything in here. So that's how you caulk. The last step after you've grouted and caulked and everything like that is to put your outlets back in, put your face plates back on. But one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that you put your box extensions in. Some people do this, some people don't. In certain areas it's code. I don't know which areas it's code and which areas it's not, but if you want to be compliant, just get these. I get these from Amazon. But you just put these on they're super simple. You don't have to disconnect any of the wiring on your outlet. I just slide them on like this, and depending on how your wires are on the back of the outlet, they'll go on easier or harder. And then you just put it into your outlet. This wire's in the way. Like this. Slide your outlet in. And what that does is it just makes it so the edge of the electrical contacts aren't coming in contact with anything, since the thing isn't sitting in the box like it used to. It's built out a little bit. And I just use drywall screws. Probably not supposed to. That's what I use. Put put them back in like that, and then I'll just grab a switch plate real quick. And now the switch plate can just go on. Put them just like that. Tighten our screws. All right, that's how you set a backsplash.